Do you feel drawn to learn more about witchcraft and the occult, but feel lost on where to start? Then welcome to Get In Loser, We're Doing Witchcraft, a podcast all about what it means to be a witch and where to get started on your journey.
Join us as we navigate through various witchy topics and share what we have learned about the craft. So get in, witches, and welcome to our first Spooktober episode, The Magical Properties of Plants, Spooky Edition.
Oh, I wanted to say before we get into the episode, I really wanted to tell you about this movie we watched last night, but I forgot what it's called. I think it's called You Are Not My Mother. Have you heard of this movie?
No.
Oh my God.
What is it on?
It is on Netflix. Well, at least it's on Netflix UK. I wonder if it's on Netflix US too, but it's a new movie. It's an Irish independent movie, and it was so good. And I had to explain it to Mike after we watched it because he wasn't so familiar with the lore that I'm not going to give anything away. Like, I'm not going to do any spoilers or anything, but I had to kind of explain to him a little bit of the lore because they reference some Irish lore and there's a lot of like witchy things in there. And it was really good. I really liked it. And it was like a subtle spookiness to it because like it's not going to be like a over the top, like a bunch of like jump scares or like slasher shit or anything like that. But it just was subtly scary, a little bit creepy, but it was really good.
It's not coming up on American Netflix.
Oh no. Yeah, it's You Are Not My Mother. So just for our listeners in America, if you don't have access to Netflix, UK, just get a VPN and change your location to England and watch this movie because it is so good. Okay, but here's the thing is like it's only got 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb.
I don't follow people's like ratings and reviews when it comes to movies and books and shit because I feel like people expect Anthony and I were literally just talking about this before I came up here because he was talking about a show that he wanted to watch, but it got really bad reviews. But like we end up watching these things and really liking them, and they'll have like 3 to, maybe 2, 3 stars, whatever. But like they end up being really good. And it's just people are shitty if it's not something that they thought it was going to be. They're like, oh, 1 star. Or like books.
Yes.
You'll see people be like, 1 star, didn't read it. And you're like, why are you rating it then? Why?
Right.
Because you're dropping the rating.
When I feel like maybe some people who like would give this a bad review, or maybe like because I really, really liked it, and Mike, he liked it, but he didn't quite understand some pieces because he wasn't familiar with the lore that they were discussing in the movie. But because like, and I feel like we've even talked about this particular lore on the podcast, and just as it relates to witchy shit, like they even have like on one of the doors, they have like Bridget's cross. And I was like, oh my God. But like it just because I knew what they were referencing and I figured it out, like I was just like, this has to be this. And it was. And I was like, oh my God, this movie's so good. But whenever I explained it to Mike, he was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I really like this. And so I think that probably the lower reviews are coming from people not understanding the lore that they're talking about.
I just searched it to see if it was on anything in America. So if you are in the US, you can watch it on Hulu. It is actually on Hulu, but that is one of the top searches when you type in You Are Not My Mother. It's like explained.
Oh no.
Yeah. So apparently a lot of people didn't get it, but
yeah,
probably why it got low ratings. But it is on Hulu, so I will watch it this week.
Yes, watch it and let me know.
I will.
Yes, it was really good.
Spooky movies. I even love like B-rated spooky movies or movies that are supposed to be spooky, but they're so cheesy that they make me laugh. I absolutely love it. But what was I gonna say? I forgot. Oh, have you seen the images of the Winnie the Pooh horror?
No.
So recently, like a couple of months ago, Winnie the Pooh dropped out of copyright because copyright is only good for, I think it's like 99 years or something like that.
Oh my God.
So Winnie the Pooh dropped out of copyright, which opens it up to like anyone can use it for anything now. And so they are making a Winnie the Pooh horror film. Did you just look it up?
I just looked it up. Blood and Honey.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Look at like that
it.
is nightmare fuel. Piglet looks terrifying.
I just don't understand why anyone would do this. I bet the guy who wrote it, whatever his name is, A.A. Milne.
Yeah.
I knew it was something with...
It was something with like initials, but I was like, C.S. Lewis is the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, isn't he? Yeah.
He is. But I bet he's rolling in his grave.
Right?
That is terrifying.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen it, look it up if you would like to have some nightmare fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what it is.
I don't like it.
Me either.
So, what are we talking about today?
Plants. My favorite topic. Plants. But we're going a little spooky with it. We're going with superstition and poisonous plants. Not all the plants are poisonous, but most of them are.
Yeah.
But with that, I just want to say that the purpose of this episode is not to encourage any of our listeners to work with, consume, or use any poisonous plants. As an aspiring herbalist myself, this is just kind of like a for funsies episode with some really cool information on poisonous and baneful plants that have some questionable historical uses and have been linked to witchcraft since the beginning. While many do work with a number of plants that we're going to talk about today, I would consider these to be advanced level herbals. Working with these plants takes a base understanding of the human body and what the components of the plants do and how each piece of them works and how your body might react to them. So please do not run out and track these down for like medicinal practices. Be very cautious in considering using them in your practice without fully understanding their purposes and their ties. And remember, we always say from episode to episode, please do your research. If you want to work with these plants, please thoroughly research them and understand what you're getting into. They are not for novice work. So with that being said, let's talk about some pretty cool plant history.
Yes. And just to add, don't even like buy them to put them on your shelf so that you can be like, oh my God, look what I have, a belladonna. Because your cat or your kid or your dog, somebody's going to get into those plants and they're going to eat them and they're going to die and it's going to be your fault. So just don't. This is not for you.
No.
And maybe it is if you're like a fucking herbalist.
Yeah, like this. I am studying to do that kind of stuff and I wouldn't touch these. I mean, vervain, I'm going to talk about vervain, and vervain is actually a very safe plant. But outside of that, for the most part, I wouldn't touch any of these plants.
Yeah.
There's
only one on my list that I would touch. The rest of them, fuck that. And even the one that I have on my list and I'm just like, oh, this isn't that bad. It still could kill you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and like a lot of them, people don't understand, like when it says that, you know, it can be used for certain things, like belladonna especially, which I'm going to cover like in depth. Belladonna is very dependent upon each individual's chemical makeup. So, you know, you could take what is considered or deemed a safe amount of belladonna and then not have a good experience or die, because that's just how this plant works. It's so unpredictable. It's not like, oh, I ate belladonna and I'm going to take this like counteractive plant or antidote or whatever you want to call it and I'll be fine. Like sometimes that doesn't work with belladonna. So
yeah, it's like the ecstasy of plants, because it's like they say, like with ecstasy, you won't know until you have it.
Yeah,
you're like allergic to it.
Yeah,
and so it could kill you the first time having it, and you like you would never know because you took a safe dose of it.
Yeah,
but
like a quote unquote safe dose.
Yeah, quote unquote. That had quotey fingers. FYI. Yeah, I'm not saying please don't go out and use ecstasy either.
Yeah, no. For our listeners, you guys just need to know that we often use hand signals and quotes, but you guys will never know.
Yeah. But
that was
that's
a quote
what it
unquote.
reminds me of. Quote unquote. Don't use belladonna, don't use ecstasy. So let's get in the background.
Just a little background. I'm not going to go in depth because our episode is already going to be pretty long, because I am a giant plant nerd and I spent a lot of time researching, writing, and talking about plants with myself. So witches and plants, or herbs, flowers, roots, just simply go together. Plants are used in various ways, and they've been tied to witchcraft since the beginning. Every plant has a magical component to it, and they've been used in kitchen witchery, in spells, offerings, and more, just in witchcraft. And then in general, some plants can even be used medicinally, or, in teas or whatever. So plants just kind of have this sordid history with humans, but also have strong ties to witches and witchcraft. And then one thing I did want to say before, I have talked about this before in the podcast. So in the episode on social media, like witchcraft and the social media, I did talk a little bit about this because there were some content creators out there posting this. So there's, a history and a lore of witches flying on broomsticks. And this comes from a medieval theory. So what they used was a flying ointment. And some of the plants that we're going to be talking about today were ingredients to this. And content creators were posting the ingredients or the recipe for flying ointment and telling people to try it. Please do not do that, because most of the ingredients, pretty much all of the ingredients except for I think vervain, was sometimes included in them as a counteractive ingredient, but they're poisonous and they cause like hallucinogenic symptoms. They cause hallucinogenic symptoms. So the idea that witches could fly came from medieval times with this. And basically, this ointment was used and inserted vaginally with a stick, so enter broomsticks, and it would cause the person to hallucinate or have very visual dreams. And because of this, it was used for divination in like way, way back times. So an example of this ointment would include a mix of poppy, mandrake root, henbane, belladonna berries, and opium juice. And this would have created a really powerful soporific. And this would cause that deep dream-filled sleep or the hallucinations. So many of the plants that we discuss in this episode are used as ingredients in various flying ointment recipes. But again, please don't use them, because most of them are poisonous. Most of them can make you, at the very least, very sick, or worse, like dead. So we just wanted to get that out of the way at the beginning. So the first plant that I'm talking about is vervain. And vervain is the only safe plant that I will be discussing. This is Verbena officinalis, and it's sometimes known as the herb of enchantment. Some other names for vervain are the sorcerer's herb, herba sacra, herba veneris, the holy herb, the chief herb, the enchanter's plant, Sempler's joy, Juno's tears, pigeonweed, and herb of the cross. Vervain is an herb of Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, and a daughter of the sea. Venus rules the arts of lovemaking, glamour, and personal beauty. Venus represents the anima, which is the feminine principle within humanity and the individual, and she's tied to Mercury, who is her male counterpart, and the animus. Together, they are a fully realized individual represented by the deity Hermaphrodite, and they represent the sacred union. In herbalism, plants of Venus contain leaves that are large, bright, rich green or rosé, soft and plentiful. Their flowers are pleasing to the eye, white, blue, rosy, charming, fine, and abundant. Their roots are early growth, but not deeply fixed. So we're talking about like real shallow roots. You don't want the ones that spread out under your house and all of that. And their odor is a subtle, delightful, pungent, and refreshing to the brain. Medically, Venusian herbs are soothing, nourishing tonics for both the body and the spirit, and they are used for beautification. They nourish and balance all organ systems, promoting harmony holistically, and they are neutral and contain both cooling and warming properties. Venusian herbs are often used in products for self-care. Vervain is not considered poisonous, like I said earlier, and it's actually deemed safe by the FDA, but I just wanted to include it in this episode because it has some great magical ties and some historical uses. Vervain contains iridoids, which are precursors to the alkaloids that we'll see in things like poppy and belladonna. It's a catalyst whose effects can enhance spell work, ritual mindset, and perception through aromatherapeutic effects, and can enhance mental clarity and memory. On the Isle of Man, islanders would sew vervain into their clothing as a sign of protection, which I thought was really cute.
That is cute. All I think about whenever you say vervain is the Vampire Diaries.
Do they use vervain?
Yeah, I swear to God they do.
That's what they use, and that's the counter, isn't it?
Yeah, or they use it to, I think it like helps them to walk in the sun too, right? Or like they have their ring and it helps them walk. I can't remember. But
probably because it is like a protection herb.
They use vervain.
It's been a while since I've watched it, but it does sound familiar.
That's the first time I ever heard of it. I thought it was made up until like a few years later. And I was like, this is actually a real thing.
Some historical facts for vervain. Ironically, vervain was historically used as a charm to protect against witchcraft. And Michael Drayton, who wrote Nymphidia in 1627, said, "Therewith her vervain and her dill that hindereth witches and their will," which I thought was really hilarious, but also a cute little rhyme. In England, garlands of vervain were worn on St. John's Eve in June. It was believed that on this night, an herb's healing powers would be especially strong. And this is pretty accurate considering most wildflowers will be in their prime around midsummer. So it wasn't too far-fetched, even though some of the historical uses that we're going to talk about throughout this episode are wild and hilarious. It was historically thought of as a cure-all that was used during the Middle Ages to help treat the plague. Ancient Druids believed that vervain held supernatural powers. Scandinavian worshippers of Thor used vervain in their rituals. Greeks and Romans considered vervain to be a holy plant, and they used the branches to purify their temples and bless their altars. In Christian lore, vervain was also used to treat Jesus's wounds on the cross. And the Aztecs and other Native American tribes used vervain roots and vervain flowers as a diuretic and as a natural treatment for headaches, circulatory issues, and insomnia. So for magical uses, vervain is considered a classical magic plant, and it has a long time relationship with love magic, which we don't necessarily condone on this podcast, but historically it has been used that way. It was used in amorous spells and charms for love, and it was made into a wash that practitioners cleanse their hands with before performing love spells for added power. Vervain is a versatile and powerful ally in plant magic, and it has been said to be used by druids in their lustral or holy waters for blessing and libations. It can be used as a general elemental offering, and its affinity with the forces of nature can help keep other plants healthy. It was used historically to help heal the land and empower spirits of nature in the areas that were neglected. It has been used historically in amulets of protection and prosperity, and it is known as the herb of evasion and was used in practice to help one escape their enemies or in aiding to avoid being detected. It has qualities of shape-shifting and invisibility in its aura. Vervain is considered a fairy herb, and it has been used in rites to summon and honor the fae and other nature spirits. Celts referred to vervain as the tresses of Taliesin, who we discussed in our Celtic deity episode. But Taliesin was a famous mythic bard who received magical powers from the goddess Ceridwen, who we always said wrong before. And I almost said wrong there. Vervain is a multi-purpose herb that can be used in most forms of practical magic. It can bring protection when calling on spirits. It can be used in manifestation spells and placed on your altar for these purposes. It can be made into infusions and used to wash divinatory tools. And it has been believed to help enhance divination and clearing the mind, centering the spirit, and enhancing psychic abilities. Medicinally, vervain is an antispasmodic, which means it's a relaxant, an antipyretic, which is fever reducing, a diuretic, which is a water reducer, astringent, which means it's constrictive, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory. I'm only going to be listing the properties for vervain in the plants that I'm talking about because it is a non-poisonous plant and it's like FDA safe. So I'm not going to give those properties for any of the poisonous plants because if you do choose to work with them, you need to do that kind of research on your own. Because vervain is an antispasmodic, it's a great plant to use to relieve like cramps, or it's thought to alleviate headaches and migraines. It has ties to strengthening memory. It was used in the 17th century to treat jaundice, dropsy, which I had to look up because I've heard dropsy, but I didn't know what it was. But I guess now we just call that edema.
Huh. Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard the term dropsy. I just didn't know what it was. So I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay, it's edema. And then it was used like as a poultice on external ulcers. Historically, this was used to aid in childbirth. And today it's used holistically to aid in depression and nervous disorders. Due to its astringency, vervain is also great to make an oral rinse for. If you have bleeding gums, mouth ulcers, or if you have a sore throat, you can also gargle with vervain. And other uses for vervain include digestive issues, urinary tract infections, kidney stones, gout, jaundice, insomnia, anxiety, depression, improved lactation, and general pain relief, especially when it comes to joint pain.
And to keep vampires at bay. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I can't remember exactly why they used it.
You know what? I think it is vervain that they use because Christians used it to keep witches away.
Yeah. So
probably. I think it was just like a general supernatural deterrent because it's a protective.
I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it was like it kept vampires away or some shit. I can't remember. Anyway, if you watch The Vampire Diaries, correct us because I am too lazy to look that up and I don't really care that much, but that's where I heard it from.
Although I used to love that show.
Same. Yeah. All right. So the first plant that I'm going to be talking about is henbane. Yeah. The Latin term for henbane is Hyoscyamus niger. I had to Google it and listen to a YouTube video because I was like, I don't know how to say that second word and it's spelled kind of funny. So
I have to learn these for the Herbal Academy. So every time because every time we learn about plants, we also include the Latin just to learn them. Mm-hmm. I ended up just like without even thinking about it, including the Latin in my notes.
Oh yeah, I put the Latin on all of mine too. Like I was
okay.
Like,
I thought about it afterwards and I was like, well, it's already there.
Yeah, well, because I figured too, like because we have listeners all over the world. Shout out to Anna because we just got the coolest email from her. But they may not have henbane as henbane in like other countries that they might even just refer to it as like the Latin term. So
yeah, well, and like it's especially important with plants that have different versions of what they are. Like belladonna is one of those. It's a nightshade, and so it's important to know the Latin name of what you're working with because that's going to be more keyed into the specifics of the properties and workings of the plants versus just calling it belladonna, because you can say belladonna and that can encompass several versions of belladonna that might have different reactants to them. So
awesome. Yeah. So henbane is also synonymous with common henbane, hogsbean, Jupiter's bean, symphonica, cassellata. Not sure about that one. Just to name a few, there was a lot listed and I wasn't going to write them all down because it was like a whole paragraph.
And I'm really sorry because my dog is full of piss and vinegar today and she keeps losing her shit for no reason. So if you guys just heard her tantrum, I apologize. She's lucky she's precious.
Yeah. She's so cute. You can't be mad at her.
Oh, I can. I don't necessarily stay mad at her, but I do get mad.
So the parts used for henbane are the fresh leaves, flowering tops, branches, and seeds. And this is found throughout Central and Southern Europe, Scotland, England, and Wales, and in Western Asia, going as far north as Siberia, and also found west in India. And it's been seen also in parts of North America and Brazil as well. And there's accounts from before 1672 that indicate that it was seen in New England by like the settlers and stuff. So interesting. In the UK, henbane is often found in sandy places, by roadsides, around old buildings, or by rubbish heaps. And it's usually found near chalky ground and near the sea. And I thought it was interesting they included about like for the old buildings and rubbish heaps, because they were saying basically like people will find this in their garden, they'll dig it up and they'll put it like in near like where they would get their rubbish picked up. But the seeds and stuff will scatter and it'll grow around there. So you have to be careful around like dump sites and everything. So historically, it's been seen throughout time, frequently mentioned in old texts and in medical works, and it was seen in the 1st century AD as a pain reliever and as a way to bring about sleep. It was also seen in the London Pharmacopoeia as a treatment for cases of epilepsy and convulsive diseases and disorders. And a lot of people claim that this is what was referenced in Hamlet. And there was a whole argument online about this that could be referring to it. And it was a really long, drawn out explanation, but it's probably not what Shakespeare was referring to in Hamlet, but it could be. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Isn't that how all history is? Maybe, might not, but it could be.
Maybe, could be, yeah. So, I mean, if you're interested in reading about that, that will be listed in our notes, like in our resources. But I literally put in my notes TLDL, TLD. I put TLDL, but TLDR because it was too long to do a whole explanation for. It is poisonous in all of its parts. There's doesn't matter, neither drying or boiling it, nothing you can do to it will destroy the toxicity of this plant. So just leave it alone.
Don't touch. No touchy.
Leaves are the most powerful part of this plant, and even the odor of the leaves can produce giddiness and stupor, which that doesn't sound that bad, but trust me, don't try to use this to get high. You're going to fuck yourself up. You won't see very often accidental cases of henbane poisoning because the plant has a very unpleasant smell and taste to be mistaken for anything else. However, there are a lot of cases throughout history where people have accidentally poisoned their families or themselves. And there's one case I was reading about of a woman who gathered a bunch of henbane roots that she mistakenly believed were parsnips, boiled them and made them into a soup, and she fed it to her family.
Oh, no.
And they all suffered severely with visions, giddiness, sleepiness, and convulsions. And then there was also a historical case of inmates at a monastery who they poisoned everybody in the monastery because they used the roots that they thought were chicory, and it wasn't.
See, and this is soup. I know a few people out here that go mushroom foraging, and I'm absolutely not. Mm-hmm. I won't do that because you never know. Some of them have such slight differences to them where it's they look almost exactly like what's safe, but they're actually poisonous. And you hear about people accidentally poisoning themselves or their families because they went foraging thinking they knew what they were getting. People that have been doing it for years that knew what they were doing, still making these mistakes. I can't bring myself to do it. Plants, that's different. I'm pretty good with plants. Mushrooms, I am not comfortable with.
Yeah, I will never forage for mushrooms. You just hear horror stories, and you hear horror stories of I was reading this one news article. I think I might have even mentioned this on the podcast where it was this family in France. They lived in an area of France where all they did was forage. They knew what they were doing, and they all fucking died because they ate a poisonous mushroom.
People just don't understand how everything. How slippery of a slope that is, and how easy it is to just unalive yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
wild.
And then also, sorry if you guys heard just now, but I was taking a drink of my drink and my straw, and the drink made a weird noise. So sorry about that. But I was thirsty, so what can I do? Yeah. Necklaces historically were made from the roots and worn by little children as charms to prevent fits and bring about easy teething. Please don't do this because you will kill your kids. What do I know? And then mythologically, is that even a word? In mythology, the dead were crowned with henbane as they wandered around this river Styx. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I'll let mythologically pass because I was yes.
Yeah. We just invented a word if that's not a word already. So for magical uses, this historically has been known as the witch's plant. It was important during the Middle Ages and used by magicians and healers in purifications and in making spells and flying ointments, as we've already, or as Tiffany's already kind of discussed. And, it was rubbed on genitals and or armpits to produce the feeling of flying. So yeah.
For those that don't know, it's genitals and armpits, and then like your nose, the membranes in your nose absorb these things faster. So that's probably why they were used that way. They might not have known that it was faster, but it's going to hit you faster, and sometimes it'll be more intense.
Yeah. I bet you they did know that because they probably rubbed it all over their bodies and they were like, we're going to try it on our legs this time. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't go as quickly. And then they're like, let me shove this up my vagine. That worked. So,
woo!
Yeah, this is amazing. But it's not. Please don't do
Are you flying? Because I think I'm flying.
It's like, well, I put it on my thigh. It's not quite hit me yet. And like 20 minutes later, they're like off their rocker too. Okay. So legends as it relates to magical uses. It was known for its power of throwing its victims into convulsions. And it was used by witches in their midnight brews. And the leaves were used to prepare a famous sorcerer's ointment, which I meant to look up the name of the ointment they were referring to because, like, on the website I was reading, it didn't list what it was. It just said a famous sorcerer's ointment. And then I forgot.
Unless it was just like flying ointment.
Probably. It probably is related right back to that. Medicinally, this is usually seen in tinctures or dried, and often the seeds and leaves are what is harvested. And a lot of information about harvesting, obviously, I'm not going to go into any of that because we don't want to be here all day, one, and two, it's poison, and I don't want to teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
So it was used as an antispasmodic, hypnotic, and as a mild diuretic. And as a narcotic medicine, it is compared to belladonna, but it is a lot milder of a narcotic as belladonna is what I was reading. And it's also been seen to be effective in the treatment of cystitis, which is UTIs for our American listeners, and can be used to dilate the eyes for procedures, and has been found to have a tranquilizing effect upon a person. And also medically, it's been used for people with intestinal problems and to relieve symptoms associated with Parkinson's disorders, nerve pain, and in motion sickness. But again, please don't go out and try and grow this or harvest this because it's not good. You could accidentally poison yourself and then be having convulsions and then chop off your tongue with your teeth, and you just don't want to deal with it. So please don't.
It's an herb of Saturn, which is what belladonna is as well. Mm-hmm. I'm just not 100% sure if it is a high alkaloid herb, which is the alkaloids in belladonna are what make it so poisonous and scary. So
okay.
Yeah, so that's probably why they're listed as kind of being similar. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a plant that most people probably have at least heard of because it is used in pop culture quite a bit, especially in Harry Potter.
And you better say it just like Hermione says it when she says the Latin term.
No, I am not attempting that. But mandrakes, which are Mandragora officinarum, and this is often referred to as the apple of Venus. So mandrake, while it is also an aerial plant above the ground, what we're talking about today is the root itself. And the root looks like a little human man. So this plant is also known as the devil's candle, the devil's lamp, and both of these are due to the belief, like an old belief that the plant used to glow at night. But the glow was actually from glowworms that were eating the leaves of the plant. The plant itself didn't glow. But that's where it got those names from.
That's really cute.
I know. Jen's eggs, testes of demons, which I thought was hilarious, Earth's apple, and little man of the gallows, which is also hilarious. So mandrake is an herb of Venus. It contains tropane alkaloids, and it is in the nightshade family, meaning that one should take precautions, like just, unless you've done a lot of research, don't touch this plant. Don't work with this plant. Don't use this plant in anything. Just don't. We're going to say that pretty much for every plant that we talk about today. The name mandrake is likely derived from Middle English due to its root's human-like appearance. The mandrake is believed to have deep connections to the underworld, and it is said that it draws its powers when it's underground. The mandrake has long been associated with witches, the devil, and the legion of malefic spirits, and they were believed to have grown out of the final void of fluids from those who hung at the gallows, which is where that last little nickname came from. Historically, mandrakes originated in Mesopotamia, and they've been present in many cultures across history. It was cultivated in 1562 by herbalist William Turner in Europe, and the ancient Greeks referred to the mandrake root as the mandragon, and it was associated with Hecate and the sorceress Circe. There's also Greek superstitions that surround the mandrake's poisonous nature that tie it to Circe as well. The earliest documented notations of the mandrake appear in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, and within the Song of Solomon. And the Greeks referred to Aphrodite as mandragoritis, meaning she of the mandrake, which I have never heard that, but I found it pretty interesting. I don't know if you have.
No, I've never heard of that.
There's also Russian folklore that refer to the mandrake as the plant that screams. And it's believed to have been used as a deterrent in reference to its powerful nature or the difficulty of exhuming such a large root. But it was used as a way to like scare little kids from digging up this plant and then ending up like poisoned. They would tell them that if they dug it up, it would scream at them and like they would get in trouble, which I thought was pretty funny. It is funny how we like terrify children to make them not do things.
Right. Yeah.
Theophrastus, who wrote the treatise on plants around 230 BCE, also claimed that there were arcane rites to harvesting the mandrake, and these included some of the following. I didn't include all of them. I just kind of included some of the funnier ones. So to harvest a mandrake, he said that first you had to trace 3 circles around the plant with a sword. And then you had to take this sword and cut off the aerial parts of the plant, but you had to be facing west when you did this. And you had to perform a ritual and dance around the site before harvesting the root. And it was deemed necessary to anoint one's hands and face with oil prior to harvesting. And this has later been believed to have been like a protection barrier from the plant's poisonous juices. It was also believed that standing upwind would protect the harvester from noxious spirits caused by the plant's contagion. And it was believed that the contagion was airborne. So as an herb of Venus, or it was believed, it could only be harvested on a Friday, and that it had to be dug up before sunrise when it was most active in producing its magical principles. But this was also believed to be the time that the evil spirits that guarded the mandrake would be sleeping. So you would be safe to harvest it at that time. Once harvested, the mandrake then must be placed in a running stream for 1 full day and 1 full night to remove its diabolical influences. And then it has to be kept wrapped in a white cloth and in a wooden box. And there's other, there's ones where it's like, if you keep it, you have to keep it in this wooden box, which was supposed to signify a coffin. And as a way of killing the evil spirits, you kept it wrapped in white cloth, and then you had to anoint it with wine. And the ritual, supposed quote unquote rituals to being able to dig up a mandrake and harvest it are hilarious. There's some of them that say you have to tell it dirty jokes for it to that's how you build a relationship with the mandrake to keep it from poisoning you. There were so many. It was so funny.
I really like that one.
Right. So magical practices for the mandrake. Mandragora is considered a patron plant of witches and to be a powerful ally in witchcraft. In every culture that the mandrake has left a mark, it's been given arcane associations and considered to be an herb of bewitchment. While all plants are believed to be possessed by a spirit, The mandrake spirit is said to be willing to act as a familiar spirit to those who know its rituals. And again, that comes from what was his name? Theophrastus and all of his rituals of harvesting mandrake. Mandrake was often used as an ingredient in love charms and potions, and the root itself has been used throughout history as a fetish or a manikin due to its humanoid form, being kept with reverence, wrapped in fabric, and fed with offerings of either wine, milk, honey, and sometimes even blood. It is believed to be able to teach one the secrets of the spirit world, and most specifically in that of techniques to work with other plants. So it's believed that it has this spirit that it also wants to be a familiar, but in being a familiar, it wants to teach you how to work with other plants, which I thought that was kind of cute. Mandrakes are used to carry out spells over long distances, but due to their poisonous nature, they are connected to death and the spirit world. Some witches grew and kept mandrake plants in the past, and they would pass them down through generations within their families, and they kept them in the family for the blessings of prosperity and power that they could bring. Medicinally, mandrake was used in Jewish communities as a cure for childlessness. So both medicinally and magically, its uses can be historically traced back to fertility. Earliest accounts of medicinal uses are credited to ancient Greeks, and there's a book called The Mystic Mandrake that says a small dose in wine, less than would occasion delirium, will relieve the deepest depression and anxiety. It was often considered an aphrodisiac since it is a plant of Venus, and mandrake is a powerful anodyne, meaning that it does have some pain-relieving properties as well as soporific. So that just means that it has some sleep-inducing qualities as well. For this reason, it was often added to wine and paired with opium to be taken as anesthetizing inebriant. In the ancient world, mandrake was considered a soporific sponge and used as an early form of anesthetic as well. These were used medicinally up until the 1800s, though their active components are still used in pharmaceutical medications today. And the effects of mandrake are hypnotic and intoxicating, but in larger doses, it will become hallucinogenic and sometimes even death-inducing. When the root is burned as an incense, it will also create a mild psychoactive effect.
I also remember this plant too from Pan's Labyrinth. This was the plant that I guess Pan or whatever had given her to put under her bed, or under her mom's bed with milk. And I think she fed it blood too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
This plant actually it's in a lot of mythology and fairy tales. This plant has a history in stuff like that. And it's always something like that too, where it's oh, you have to feed it, or, they treat it like it is a living human. And it's funny because it does look like a little angry man.
Yeah, it does.
And I mean, Harry Potter, they just scream all the time. So, Okay. So next up I have poppy. So most people know what a poppy is. The Latin name for it is Papaver somniferum, and this is sometimes referred to as the gateway of life and death. Poppies have a very tangled history with humans, and they can be and are still used medicinally to ease pain and bring peaceful sleep, but they're also the root of an epidemic centered around opioids that we are seeing today, all over the world, unfortunately. But they are a cute little flower. I love poppies. Poppies are the California state flower, and in California, it's actually illegal to pick or collect or harvest poppies in the wild. The flower is actually super easy to grow yourself, and many people already include poppies in their flower beds for decor. Poppies are an herb of Venus, and in terms of crops, poppies are grown in succession with wheat and barley. They're a plant of the moon, the underworld, and considered to be of the place between life, death, and sleep. The milky latex that comes out of a poppy plant is referred to as the tears of the moon, and it has also been said that poppies grew from the spilled tears of Aphrodite when she mourned the death of Adonis. Poppies are also associated with the mother and the crone aspect of the goddess. Cybele and Ceres are associated with poppies, and they're often depicted holding or wearing them. Nyx had poppies around her temples in many of her depictions, and Morpheus, who is the god of dreams, and if you aren't watching The Sandman on Netflix already, please do, because they picked a perfect Morpheus in this. Have you watched it yet?
I watched the first episode and Mike's not into it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to watch it without you. And I just haven't had the chance to. But I like it already so much. So
yeah, it's like visually beautiful. They did so good with it. But Morpheus, so if you're not watching it, Morpheus is the god of dreams. And this is where morphine actually gets its name. Hypnos, Hermes, and Thanatos are also often depicted holding a poppy flower or a poppy pod because of the plant's connection to sleep and death. Poppy's opiums contain the alkaloids morphine, codeine, and narcotine, all of which are used currently in modern medicine as some of our strongest pain-killing drugs, but they also come with a very high addiction rate when used over extended periods of time. These medications were created by Big Pharma for profit without regard for public safety. And while they definitely can do good and help, these extracted and synthetic versions of the poppy flower of opium often do more damage than they do good. Poppy's chemical addictiveness can act quickly by creating a euphoria and by numbing our emotions, making just your everyday normal functioning feel completely unbearable. And that's why we see this as such a horrible epidemic right now. Historically, poppies have been part of our pharmacopoeia since ancient times. Ways to attain opium were discovered in Central Europe in the Stone Age. Neolithic tombs contained remnants in France, Switzerland, northern Italy, and southern Germany. Roman accounts claimed that Celtic Gauls were also aware of poppy cultivation, harvest, and use. And early Germanic lore stated that poppy fields were sacred sites to Odin, and they were visited by pilgrims for healing. Paracelsus created laudanum from opium, henbane, crushed pearls, and coral, and this was used as a remedy throughout Europe until the late 1600s. And this is my favorite thing that I found about poppies right here. So there's a man named Thomas, I don't know if it's Sydenheim or Sydenheim. I tried looking up the pronunciation and people were saying it different ways. So either of those, Sydenheim or Sydenheim, also created a tincture of opium from poppies, saffron, cinnamon, powdered cloves, and Spanish wine. And it was an effective remedy for pain and a powerful inebriant known as Sydenheim's laudanum. So like the original lean or scissor. I was reading about this and I was laughing, and Anthony was in his office and he's like, what are you laughing at? And I told him and he was like, you are ridiculous. And I was like, it was like the original lean.
Literally, like you're reading this, you're like, this sounds familiar.
So yeah, even back in the old days, they used to, sip on the scissor.
Yeah. As you do. But don't do it.
But don't do it.
Yeah.
Poppies were the first plants to come back in the battlefields in northern France and Belgium after World War I, and they became the symbol of remembrance for fallen soldiers, which I thought this was really cool to learn now, because I remember when living in Germany, there was I can't even remember what time of year it was, but I remember like everyone wearing their little poppy pens and stuff, and I didn't know, I knew that it had to do with World War I, but I didn't know the significance of it. But essentially, all this land is destroyed due to war, and then the first plant to grow out of it is a poppy flower. So I thought that was precious.
It is precious. I know. So here in the UK, if it's around the same time, because they are just crazy about the poppies here too. If it's not, I don't know if they have a national flower, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a poppy. But they grow wild, and they're really the poppy fields here. They usually around May, June is whenever they're full bloom, and you can see them growing on the side of the road everywhere.
Yeah. But poppy is a resilient little plant. It's like a dandelion where it'll grow out of concrete.
Literally.
It'll find a way.
Yeah. You'll just drive and it's on the side of the road growing up. And then randomly we'll have a few in our yard from, I guess, being scattered by the winds, or a bird pooping it out or something.
Yeah.
And they're everywhere.
In California, we have poppy fields and stuff and poppy festivals because it's the state flower. And I remember going to them as kids. I've always loved poppies though. They're so cute.
They are really cute. I want to get a poppy tattoo before I leave.
I got my giant poppy tattoo.
Yes.
Okay. Or ancient Greek mythology placed the origins of the poppy with the goddess Demeter, stating that she grew them when Hades abducted Persephone. Some lore states that Persephone was in a field picking poppies at the time of her abduction, before she became the queen of the underworld. So, magical uses for the poppy. It's a plant of the night and of the moon, and it rules over dreams, illusions, and shadows. Poppy was taken internally to protect against nocturnal creatures like vampires or to ward off nightmares. Poppy seeds have been used historically in practice to blind one's enemies, and that's a quote unquote too. And then it was said that if you gathered poppies in your enemy's name, it was like a way to curse them. Working with poppies is also believed to be a way to send dreams and visions and to draw down the influence of the moon, including sending the moon's full madness upon an enemy. Poppy petals can be used in charms for luck, in love, money, and even in health. And it's often listed as an ingredient in the medieval flying ointment. And it was likely that poppy was added to help counteract some of the more uncomfortable side effects of other ingredients. So, like, it was once believed to be an antidote to the poisoning effects of plants within the deadly nightshade family. But it wasn't that it was an antidote. It's that it was like euphoria inducing and pain relieving and sleep inducing. So it wasn't like actually countering it. It was just making you more comfortable. And then during Roman times, poppy was used in offerings to appease the spirits of the dead. Medicinal uses outside of like what we already know about opium. The parts used are the dried leaves, and traditionally they're made into infusions or decoctions. And they were also smoked sometimes historically. As most know, and as I've already discussed, opium comes from poppies, and it's a valuable pain reliever and sedative. Poppy tinctures have been used medically throughout time to help with frayed nerves from stress that cause insomnia. And the tincture helps to calm these nerves and to like help induce sleep in the person. And decoctions of poppies have been made to help soothe pain externally. Juice of the poppy was included in the formula for an early form of anesthetic used in surgical operations. And this formula also included plants like henbane and mandrake. So
that's interesting.
Again, historical uses to me are always wild. It's like, let's just throw this at it.
Right. Like, I saw this growing in my backyard.
I'm going to try it.
We're just going to see. Maybe. Who knows?
I saw a meme the other day and it was like, have we tried popping all plants or did we stop at corn?
Right. Because maybe we should try to pop the rest that aren't poisonous.
And see how delicious they are.
Yeah. So the next one I'm going to be talking about is aconite. Am I saying that right? Aconite? Mm-hmm. Is that how you would say it? Okay. The Latin term for this is Aconitum napellus. It's also known as monkshood, wolfsbane, or a plethora of other names. Like there was a whole ass paragraph again, and I was like, we're just going to take the other ones. This plant grows in rocky areas in the Northern Hemisphere, but it's also seen in the Swiss Alps, Salzburg, and in Germany. The parts of this plant that are used are the leaves, stem, the flowering tops, and the root. The leaves and the top are usually used fresh. The root is usually used dried. And the roots are usually harvested in autumn. And because of how poisonous the root is, it is considered best that the root is grown and collected under the same conditions to maintain uniformity in like its poisonousness, because like it's really poisonous.
Yeah.
So also, like we said 1,000 times already, don't grow this. Symptoms of poisoning consist of like first you'll feel like tingling and numbness of the tongue and the mouth and a sensation of ants crawling all over your body, followed by like nausea and vomiting, along with epigastric pain, labored breathing, weak or irregular pulse. You'll feel cold and clammy. You might be giddy or like staggering around. And just to give you an idea of how strong this is, 1/50th of a grain will kill a sparrow in a few seconds, and 1/10 of a grain will kill a rabbit in 5 minutes. Like this shit is really powerful and can kill you. So don't fuck with this. Historically, it's been said to have been discovered by Hecate herself. She invented it from the foam of Cerberus, and it was a poison that the old men of the island of Ceos were condemned to drink when they became infirm and of no use to this day.
They're like, your time has come.
Yeah, and go ahead and drink this shit.
Bye.
You need to die. Bye. A horrible, tragic death.
Go poison yourself.
Yeah. It's also said to be the poison that Medea prepared for Theseus. Historically, it has been used in the East Indies in war and to poison spears, darts, and arrows to keep tigers at bay. And in mythology, it was used to ward off werewolves, hence the name wolfsbane. So, magical uses, it's used in combination with belladonna and flying ointment. It's representative of death, rebirth, and transformation through sorcery and shapeshifting. And it's connected to the spirits of the battlefield, gods and goddesses, because it's said to protect its allies and arousing bloodlust and inciting fear in your enemies. So,
Nice.
I mean, I don't know exactly. I guess the fear would come from the fact that, like, if you were coming at me with a poisoned spear,
I'd be terrified.
Like, I'm sorry, I don't feel like having like a terrible death right here.
Well, and especially back then, they'd be like, this poppy plant is the antidote. And you're like, I still died, but I felt comfortable.
Right. Medicinally, the root contains chemicals that improve circulation and can decrease pain, but also contains chemicals that can seriously harm the heart, muscles, and nerves. And it can be used in treatment of heart failure, asthma, hair loss, and diarrhea. But again, it's going to kill you. So
yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, plant history is hilarious to me, because they're like, hey, we used this too. There was one thing where it might be belladonna. I can't remember which plant, but one of the plants I was researching, they were like, oh, smoke these leaves to treat your asthma. And I'm like,
okay.
That A and B is not
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Counterintuitive.
Counterintuitive.
What even is that? Not even a word.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Am I dumb? I don't know that word.
We're just making up shit. Look, it's fine.
That's two idiots making a podcast. We did not lie to you guys.
No, we didn't.
But yeah, plant history is hilarious. If you are ever bored, just look up historical uses for plants or like magical uses, because even if these plants weren't actually used by witches, like poisonous plants especially are always tied to witches and the devil and demons, and it's ridiculous. You can find some pretty entertaining stuff on plants.
And so they have a whole section on WebMD about this plant, and it says all species of the plant and products containing it are dangerous. It is a strong and fast poison that can cause nausea, vomiting, breathing problems, heart problems, and death. But all of that, what I was saying when I was reading it, I was kind of cracking up because it just reminds me of like prescription commercials anyway.
Symptoms may include heart failure, anxiety, depression.
Like, oh, wow.
Suicidal thoughts, death.
I'm so glad.
But also take this medicine.
Yeah, but also take it. Like, I'm so glad that like my period stopped, but I'm also going to die. Is that what you're saying? Like, okay.
Lord.
But it's been used historically in tinctures and ointments and sometimes as a hypodermic injection. Could you imagine getting a hypodermic injection of this shit? No, thank you. And it's also been seen a lot in Chinese and other Eastern Asian herbal traditions. And it's said to be the most potent herb for reviving the yang. And, you know, I don't know very much about Eastern Asian practices or Chinese practices, so I'm not going to be like, and yeah, I totally use this. Please don't. Please see a professional. But they usually mix it with other complementary herbs and it's given as a tonic. So I'm assuming it's like
usually
maybe
very minuscule, like 1/1000th of a part.
Yeah. So don't think that you can just take this to revive your yang.
Again, like I said at the beginning, this is for funsies and just for like fun, crazy, wild information on plants that are tied to witches and supernatural and wild medical history. This is not an episode to be like, hey, you should go work with these plants. Unless it's vervain. You're free to work with vervain because that's safe. And you can grow poppies in your flower beds because they're really cute little guys. But don't go extracting poppies opium and then trying to use it because you'll probably die. Certain death. And then, okay, so I'm now we're going to talk about belladonna, which of course is like one of the most infamous plants. I feel like outside of mandrake, belladonna is probably one of the most known like poisonous plants, especially even like pop culture wise, because it is used in a lot of pop culture references as well. So the Latin name for belladonna is Atropa belladonna, and this refers to Atropos, who is one of the three fates and the one that cuts the thread connecting one to the web of life. And it refers to the plant's ability to separate us from our own body and life force. So
I mean,
let's just, from the start, this plant is a nope plant.
Yeah.
So Hildegard von Bingen wrote Physica, which is like an entire book on plants used medicinally. She wrote this in 1998, but she said, the deadly nightshade has coldness in it, and this coldness also holds evil and barrenness, and in the earth and in the place where it grows. A diabolic influence has some share and participation in its craft, and it is dangerous for a man to eat or drink, for it destroys his spirit as if he were dead. And that's referring, yeah. Most of the time, at the very least, like this quote says, this plant will destroy your spirit as if you were dead if it doesn't actually make you dead. So, again, no.
So you're going to suffer, but you're not going to be happy about it too.
Yeah. I feel like in Family Guy, when he like rolls up the newspaper and he smacks them, he's like, no, to Brian the dog. Mm-hmm. No, that's what I'm doing to you right now. If you're even thinking about belladonna, like if you don't have some serious schooling behind you and you haven't researched and you don't know how the body works and how these plants can affect the body, don't even think about it. So some other names for belladonna are deadly nightshade, the beautiful seductress, the devil's berry, banewort, the devil's herb, the great moral, tolkersha, valkerbeeren, which means Valkyrie berry, and valkerbaum, which is Valkyrie tree. It's related to mandrake, henbane, and thornapple, and together these plants are known as the great witching herbs. These plants can be seen throughout apothecary history as being known for their sedative and pain-relieving properties and their powers of vision and spiritual flight. It's an herb of Saturn. Saturn points out those parts of ourselves that we're afraid to confront and forces us to embrace our shadow. Saturn is a teacher of agriculture and the sower of seeds and rules over boundaries that which separate the civilized world from the wild wood and the scorching desert, ruling over wayside plants that grow in the wastelands and those botanical poisons that restrict the life force. In herbalism, Saturn rules over plants with dark leaves that are hairy, hard, dry, parched, coarse, and of ill-favored appearance. Their flowers include unprepossessing, gloomy, dull, greenish, faded or dirty white or pale red, prickly and disagreeable flowers. Roots spread widely in the earth. They have very earthy roots, and the odor is often fetid, putrid, and muddy or earthy. Medicinally, Saturn is associated with the skeleton and muscular system, and plants that heal and strengthen the connective tissue and support structures of the body. And that's just in general. That's not in terms of belladonna. Chemically, belladonna has a high alkaloid content, with her main compounds being atropine, solanin, and scopolamine. These are known as tropane alkaloids that act on the human nervous system. Belladonna is considered to be sacred to Hecate, and its namesake is Bellona, the Roman goddess of war. Both are reflected in the plant's unpredictability. Historically, belladonna was used in the 11th century by the Scots under King Duncan I, who gave the invading Danish army belladonna-infused beer that put them into a weakened delirium, allowing them to be easily overpowered. Which, smart, but also, wow. Talk about like a chemical warfare.
Right.
He's like, hey, drink this beer that I've poisoned. Rude. It was also believed to be used in the Parthian Wars to poison the troops of Marcus Antonius due to Plutarch giving a full detailed account on the poison's effects. That is one of those that's like it's possible that it was, because it was just that, like, basically he was like, hey, belladonna does all these things. And then there were like some things that happened that they were like, I think that's what happened. But there's no like recorded history that it was factual, if that makes sense. This is an infamous herb that was used in the Middle Ages by physicians and magicians and has been mentioned in many obscure and well-known manuscripts on medicine and in medieval books covering magic. It was used medicinally in preparations well into the 1800s before its use faded out from the general population, where its value was only remembered by herbalists and cunning folk. It has been stated in historical attacks against witches as an herb used to shapeshift into an animal in reference to Solanum somniferum, which is sleeping nightshade. In southern Germany, there was a tradition where hunters would ingest 3 to 4 belladonna berries to help sharpen their senses. And this makes me laugh because I don't think it sharpened their senses for hunting. I think they were hallucinating other things and being like, we saw so many animals out there. But they were like hallucinations, not actual animals, because no. They're not just like, let me eat this singular berry. They were like, let me eat like 4 of these. No, they were probably hallucinating. In Morocco, they used to dry the berries and make a tea with sugar, and they believe this helped ease depression when done in small doses. They also believe this helped clear the mind for intellectual focus, and this is possibly what was like unknown at the time as ADHD. So they used it basically as an ADHD management medication, which is also hilarious. It was also considered to be a male aphrodisiac, which I've seen it listed in a few different places, but not why.
I wonder if like the hallucinations sometimes could be like sexy and it's like, oh,
ooh, maybe, I don't know. Belladonna's magical ties. It is considered a gatekeeper plant. Belladonna opens the energy centers and expands awareness to the spiritual realm. Working with belladonna removes toxic people and situations while providing offensive protection. It's used in works of necromancy, specifically calling the dead to the middle world for assistance. Belladonna's affinity with witchcraft makes it the perfect plant for offerings. It's considered the witch's power plant, and it can be added to any formula or charm for added power, and it can be used to bring success in all endeavors. Belladonna is one of the ingredients of medieval flying ointment, though it would have come with some serious uncomfortable side effects that we've talked about with the other plants as well. It's known for destroying enemies through a subversive means, binding their actions and exposing their secrets. The juice of the berries was used to anoint objects of magical protection, divination, and necromantic fetishes. You can also create a tincture with the berries for the same purposes, since the tincture itself will keep for years. Home protection wreaths were crafted out of belladonna vines. They were typically made in the summer and then allowed to dry and hang all year long. And this was also believed to protect the home against lightning strikes, which is very specific. Medicinal uses for belladonna. So the parts used were leaves, which were dried into a powder or rolled into cigarettes, the fluid extracts or tinctures, and then with the roots, they were powdered or fluid extracts, and berries were juiced whole. Herbivores are more resistant to the alkaloids in belladonna than carnivores are, which I thought was interesting, but I'm assuming that it's because you eat more plants, so you get more of the like phytochemicals and alkaloids and whatever that the plant contains, so it helps you like build up a tolerance to it essentially.
Yeah.
Belladonna was used to treat many ailments historically. Ayurvedic tradition suggests that a daily dose of a trope of belladonna can be taken medicinally when it's properly prepared by a professional herbalist. Belladonna leaves were smoked and used in cigarettes to help with asthma in the early 1900s. So a treatment known as Asthmador was a preparation of belladonna, datura, and potassium perchlorate sold as cigarettes and in powder form to be burned as an incense and used to help treat asthma, which seems so backwards to me. And
it really
comes
does.
into our whole medical history is just wild. So, but it's also like important to note that side effects of both were hallucinations and a drying up of the body's fluids, resulting in an extremely dry mouth and the inability to urinate, lasting for long periods of time, like longer than the time that the belladonna stays in your system. Like this was like a chronic symptom.
That's
like,
terrible.
Could you imagine? You're like, let me treat my asthma, and now I haven't peed for 4 days.
Yeah, that would be terrible. And it reminds me too, because like I know like during that time and like that Victorian turn of the century time, they also would send, if you had asthma or any sort of lung issue, they would send you to like these mountain climate areas for like fresh air and
Get
shit.
the fresh mountain air.
But you're at a higher altitude and it's also drying you out because you're at a higher altitude, and then you're smoking some shit
that's also drying you out even more. It's wild. It's wild. Historically, belladonna was also used as plasters, poultices, and ointments for pain. The berries have been used in tinctures and alcohol infusions to induce a trance and act as an aphrodisiac that inhibits the senses. Classical Italian lore discusses women using the tincture to dilate their pupils for beautification purposes. It would basically give them a bedroom eye look, which meant it was more likely that they would have an amorous affair or get a husband even.
Because they're looking around like fucking high off their ass.
Well, apparently that was like the we always are given, women are always given like ridiculous beauty standards. So like during this time in Italy, it was believed that large pupils were the gold standard when you're looking for a woman. So women were basically poisoning themselves with belladonna eye drops just so that men found them attractive.
Gross.
Wow. Just wow. The berries were said to have been added to wine in small amounts for their trance-inducing effects, leading to prophetic visions. So, like, on one hand, belladonna can be successfully used as an analgesic and an anesthetic, while on the other, it could, like, easily kill you. So, super unpredictable plant. It's been used to treat opiate overdose and muscarinic mushroom poisoning. And side effects of ingesting belladonna could include dilation of the pupils, blurred vision, intense dreams, delusions in the waking state. The effects of belladonna vary widely, and they depend on things like dosage, individual biochemistry, and the method of ingestion. And when used too frequently, tropane alkaloids contained in belladonna can build up in the tissue of the heart, resulting in a number of health problems. These alkaloids are what make oral ingestion of belladonna unsafe, and ingestion of belladonna overall is just not recommended, period. Like, don't do it. It's a nope plant.
It is. Leave it alone.
And don't touch.
No touchy. So a less nope plant to kind of end it is lady's mantle, or Alchemilla vulgaris. And it's also known as lion's foot, bear's foot, nine hooks, stellaria, and leontopodium. The parts used are the herb and the root, and it's usually found in the American Andes, and only a few from the order of Alchemilla are found in Europe, North America, and Northern and Western Asia. Common lady's mantle is what's found all over the UK, and it's usually seen in colder areas and at higher altitudes, like in the Scottish Highlands. It is part of the rose family, and it's admired for its foliage because the leaves resemble stars and the flowers are like small little clusters of yellow or green flowers that grow in bunches.
Precious.
That is precious. Historically, this plant was revered by alchemists who went out early in the morning to collect the dew from the leaves of the plant. Lady's mantle sweats pearls of water, which can be collected from the center of its leaves, and it's said that this dew was essential in the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Isn't that cute?
I love that.
Yes. And historically, women would sometimes collect the dew in search of eternal beauty. And so there was this belief that if you put the dew on your skin, you would impart a special radiance of elfin allure. So
Looks
get your
like
glow
I need to
on.
grow some ladies' mantle.
I know, right? And it's been tied to many different goddesses from different pantheons like Isis, Taweret, Brigid, Damara, Freya, Frigg, Demeter, Hera, and Libera. It's also tied to the male gods Dionysus and Pan. So magical uses, it's connected to the planet of Venus and the element of water. The dewdrops are important magically as they are used to cleanse the third eye to make it more acute and to bring about visions. And historically, it's like I mentioned, it's been tied to Freya because this herb is used in fertility magic and protection. It's said to improve libido and passion between a couple before they have sex if they involve a ritual of applying lady's mantle flowers to the chest and stomach of their lover and or drinking a tea made of the herb before they do it.
Interesting.
It is very interesting. And that's why it's tied to Dionysus and Pan.
Yeah.
Carrying the flowers is said to improve attractiveness to others, while carrying the dried leaves is said to help you attract love into your life. Bathing with the dried herb added to your bath is supposed to improve your self-love and beauty, which I love that. And it's also said that fairies appreciate the dew from this little plant as well and will collect it and drink it as a magical elixir. So I guess this is probably where like rubbing it on your face will impart some like elven magical lure onto your body.
This sounds like a much needed plant.
Yes. Additionally, it can be used as a booster or a strengthener in spells, much like what we would use for like clear quartz. So if you can, or it can magnify magic, and if you plant it in your garden, it's said to help keep you and your home protected and warded from baneful magic. So just even having it around your home is good. Birding lady's mantle is thought to cure a broken heart, or if you're mourning the loss of a relationship, and adding it to an anointing oil and anointing oneself or a candle is said to improve the ritual or spell, strengthen the energy flow, and improve psychic awareness. So pretty cute. Medicinal uses. The whole herb is usually used, especially when harvested in June or July when the flower and leaves are at its prime, and they are used fresh or dried. The root is also used mostly when it's fresh. So lady's mantle has astringent and stypic properties due to the tannin that it contains. It is a drying and binding herb and was considered a great herb for treating wounds. Accounts of it being used for both inward and outward wounds is widely documented, and whether you're drinking a decoction or soaking cotton in a mixture of lady's mantle and then applying it to the wound directly, it's been seen in all those cases. And it can be used to treat acne, rashes, and gangrene, which seems kind of like an escalation there. And
you can treat your acne, maybe if you have a little rash, or if you're gangrene.
Right, yeah. Works on that too.
You got a gangrenous wound?
Just slap some on there.
All I can think of when I hear gangrene though is Austin Powers. What is that character? It's Will Ferrell, and he like gets pushed down the cliff and he breaks his leg, and he's like, the wound is starting to smell gangrenous.
That's right. I can't. And he's wearing like the little like hat.
Yeah, the little. He has a funny name in it too. Is it like he Mustafa or something?
It is. It is. That is his name. Something bad always happens to him. He just doesn't die.
He's like, it's beginning to smell like almonds.
Yeah.
Gangrene always makes me think of that scene.
Yeah, that is really funny. I forgot about that.
Not that word comes up often enough, but like on the few occasions that word has come up, I'm like, oh, the wound is beginning to turn gangrenous.
Just think, if there was freaking lady's mantle growing around, he could have just slapped it on there. He would have been okay.
Yeah.
It's also been used to treat canker sores in your mouth. So we love a good canker sore treatment. It can be used to cure excessive menstruation, and with an infusion of 1 ounce of the dried herb mixed with like a pint of boiling water, and then you drink it as a tea.
Look, all menstruation is excessive.
Mm-hmm.
Go
that
away.
Is true. Truer words have never been spoken. A strong decoction of the fresh root is recommended to stop all bleeding. So just FYI for that. And it's also believed to regulate the female cycle, as it's believed to strengthen the uterus, and supposedly it tightens the female genitalia. Insert Like a Virgin by Madonna here.
Like a virgin.
Hey. And women in historical times used to apply this to their breasts to make them more firm.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And I was reading that midwives would apply this in the downstairs area after childbirth to help a mother recover faster and to be able to carry more children sooner, which I didn't like that part of the
They're
sentence.
like, let's heal you and get another baby in there.
Right. Yeah. I like the first part. And then I read the last part of the sentence and I was like, no, not that part. Like, just
we started off so strong.
Yes. In Sweden, a tincture of the leaves has been used in treating convulsive disorders, and if placed under a pillow at night, the herb is said to promote sleep. So interesting little tidbits. I really like Lady's Mantle, but
yeah,
as with all the herbs we discussed today, we said this so many times, there is a warning with using it. When using too much over time, especially in large doses, it's rumored to cause liver damage. And honestly, there's a lack of research on this. So, I mean, just be on the safe side and do your own research. I mean, this could definitely, it might not be as bad as this, but that's the rumor, is that it could cause liver damage. And if you're pregnant and or nursing, it is highly suggested to not use this herb at all, because there is, like I said, a lack of research on any unintentional side effects with using Lady's Mantle. So
yeah, we see this in herbalism a lot too, even with just some everyday common herbs. There's a lot that are actually suggested not to be used during pregnancy because of their medicinal properties, like potentially causing harm to the baby, or because there is a lack of evidence or a lack of research done on like that particular plant and pregnancy, that it's just really unknown. Again, that's just something that we see in herbalism overall. Like, a lot of research will contradict itself, or, like one person might say, oh, this is the dosage, that's correct, while another person will be like, no, you can't use it at all. So that's why, especially when it comes to plants, I like harp on making sure that you do thorough research, that you're cross-referencing, because while it might seem safe from like one point of view, there might be, 20 other accounts of saying like, no, this is actually like very harmful and this is why. So just always make sure that you're not sticking with just one source, or, just reading one and going, okay, it's good. Like, make sure you're cross-referencing, because especially when it comes to like ingesting or working with plants, it could be very dangerous. And with it, we also gave you a nope sandwich in case you didn't notice. We started off with safe, gave you a bunch of nope plants, and then ended off with what could be mostly safe too.
Yeah. And that wasn't intentional.
No.
It just happened.
I noticed it when I was like, you were going through one of the other plants, and I was scrolling to see how many we had left. And I was like, oh, we started with safe and ended with safe.
Perfect. We're just
with a bunch of nope in between.
A bunch of nope. And it was intentional. I did that on purpose.
Yeah, totally did.
Totally on purpose. But yes, you can use Lady's Mantle sometimes, but please do your research.
Yep.
That's it for this episode of Get In Loser, We're Doing Witchcraft. You can find our source material for this episode linked in the show notes. If you love this episode, we would be forever thankful if you leave us a 5-star review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you really love the show and want more Get In Loser content, check out our Supercast link provided in the show notes, or search the Supercast website for Get In Loser, We're Doing Witchcraft. There you can purchase a membership to our podcast and obtain exclusives like getting episodes early, shoutouts on the show, access to our Ask Me Anything forum, our monthly newsletter, a promo code for merchandise, and more.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Get In Witches, or email us at we'redoingwitchcraft@gmail.com. Check us out next week, where we will dive into Halloween superstitions. Until then, blessed be witches.